to CREATIO Arena, where I am your host, Alex Petronenko, product evangelist with CREATIO. And today, as always, we're having some incredible speakers. I'm very glad to welcome Stefan Dura, Managing Director of Qualisoft, our partner in Germany, to the conversation, and as well Daniel Ellman, Senior Analyst with Nucleus Research. Of course, as always, we have Eric Hale, our Director of Global Sales Enablement. Gentlemen, welcome to the arena. How are you doing today?
Thanks, Alex. Good.
All right, perfect. So today's our topic is what is the biggest challenge in the process of digital transformation, right? We're going to be talking about this because this is quite an interesting topic, and I feel like we're going to have a very interesting discussion and some very interesting points of view. For our attendees, I would like to remind that you can vote in the bottom of the screen whether you believe that the leadership is the biggest challenge or technology is the biggest challenge itself, right? And don't forget to ask your questions or share your thoughts in the chat area and tell us what you think, basically. Okay, gentlemen, so let's start our discussion, right? And as always, let's probably give, a few words on, general discussion. And Stefan, if you don't mind, let's start with you. So what do you think? What's the biggest challenge in the digital transformation?
Actually, if I'm looking at the point of dependencies and prerequisites, I would say that technology is one of the biggest challenges at the moment. Because as we were seeing, just to give you a little small example, just picture a company having an ERP system, in place for 10 years or more, and now they need to change it for whatever reasons. You can imagine the kind of hassle that they have to go through and what kind of money they have to pay to actually exchange that. So for me, all the new trends that technology brings is always also a topic on, can I afford it? Is the vendor trustable? How about legal prerequisites that I do have with the technology I'm going to use? So for me, actually, one of the biggest challenges is technology, and I'm pretty sure we're going to hear some other examples I can bring up during the discussion today that we're seeing. Don't take it as simple as some of the, or should I say, the end user at the moment feels it is, because as an app, you have like technology with your fingertips. But when you look what's all in the background, actually making it possible, and how many people have to work for you that this app is actually working as it is incredible and amazing.
All right, perfect, interesting. Daniel, as a senior analyst with Nucleus, what do you see in your line of work? How can you answer this question, like for you personally or based on your experience? What is the challenge there?
Yeah, definitely. I think, mostly it comes down to the fact that the people in a company are the most valuable asset to a company. And I think everything that they do needs to be relating to maximizing the possibility that they'll be successful in what they're doing. So I think when you take a digital transformation, that's very disruptive to how people work. And yes, it can come with some great benefits, but you need to understand that those people have habits and skills and comfort levels. And without, taking steps to address those and make sure that they have the skills to take advantage of this new technology that they're using, and then that they're in a culture and an environment that they feel supported and I guess able to make mistakes and able to really learn and get the most out of using the technology. Okay. Without that, I don't think that it's able to be successful. And I think I can offer the example as well that, if we're all a sales organization, everyone watching here, and I give everyone, a CRM. So I give the best CRM out there, CREATIO Sales, of course. And, what's going to happen is some folks are going to be better at using it than others, and it's going to become very tribal and siloed, and some people will be successful. And some people will become frustrated and won't use it. And, there's going to be a real lack of standardization. And, in the long term, I don't think it would get off the ground very well.
Okay, interesting. But this is where you kind of share like a few ideas and a few thoughts, right? And some of them are basically talking about the usability and the user adoption of that software, right? So of that technology. So would you say that the software itself can be the root and can be the cause of maybe a lower adoption rate if the users don't know how to use it? It's not actually about the leadership in the end.
I mean, I think to some extent, absolutely. If you have a piece of software that's incredibly difficult to use or with an interface that's not very intuitive, then absolutely that will hinder adoption, and it's kind of a non-starter. However, even any sort of change to my routine, folks are going to resist, especially when you get into a large scale organization with, talk about tens or hundreds of people working on a team together. I think you really need to put that infrastructure in place to get everyone standardized and share best practices to get really on the same page.
Yeah, interesting, because I'm glad that we actually have you guys, Stefan and Daniel, as speakers on today's discussion, right? Because we can have a very interesting kind of perspective over how to overcome these challenges as well, because I'm pretty sure that our audience, is definitely going to be interested in overcoming those challenges. But we'll probably get to it in just a couple minutes. And Eric, what do you think? I know that you have some very strong opinions on this side.
Well, yeah, I mean, and it's as with these arenas, Alex, a lot is subject to opinions, right? There's a lot of gray area. I think one is dependent on the other, but I think that the role of IT is kind of fundamentally changed, right? We don't necessarily see IT departments focused on keeping the servers up, keeping your data centers up, keeping the network up. That's all table stakes at this point, and can be outsourced for that matter, right? The role of IT is really becoming more focused on developing innovative products for the companies. So it's not so much about the technology. You can go out and buy pretty much any piece of technology now, but it's a matter of aligning that technology and that strategy and having that communication across the organization that is going to make that technology work and be beneficial for the organization. So if we're, again, one's dependent on the other, but if we're talking about the biggest challenge, I think aligning, that thought process across the organization is really what's a challenge. Because if you don't have that alignment from the top down, any project is going to be destined to fail. So I would, tend to lean on the side of, leadership being the biggest challenge, because they're having to find new ways, to manage this. And this is again, COVID's really exposed this in a lot of organizations where we need to have that strategy in place, and then technology follows. So
that's interesting, because I think you're actually kind of channeling the thought that we had on one of our previous discussions, right, about having the leadership to actually be able to explain or really deliver the whole idea of why a specific change is happening, right? And when you actually achieve this, right, this can actually support the whole process of the digital transformation, right? But one of the interesting questions that I actually noticed in the chat area is, of course, related to COVID, right? And what are going to be the new challenges within those processes post-COVID, right? So if we kind of start looking at it in a perspective of of the digital transformation and our topic today, do you still think that it would be the leadership that is going to be the main challenge, or you think that technology can actually become a main factor of the challenge? What do you think, Eric?
Well, I think that technology is there. I think, again, when we talk about COVID, we had to find new ways of doing business, and I think that we were able to accomplish that from a technology perspective. But what impact is that going to have going forward, right? So now that we have all of this great technology, there can be two methods to this, right? It could be replacement. Like now we have technology that's going to replace what humans do, or we've automated a lot of this process because we've been forced to. So again, I think the challenge will be, how do we not have that replacement mentality, but an augmentation mentality where you repurpose, that human factor. We can't just automate everything and be completely digital. We need to have that human factor. And I think that from a leadership perspective, they have to have a strategy to repurpose, their employees to accommodate that human factor for what's replaced.
Stefan, sorry, Eric. Stefan, because you work with many different companies, right, and you're partner not just of CREATIO but other organizations as well. what do you see in your line of work? Like, how are the, your customers or your prospects are actually addressing this post-COVID situation or on-COVID situation at this moment, right? Do they express their challenges themselves, right? Or have you actually identified some of them?
Let me put it that way. I'm sure a lot of those companies that haven't started their digital transformation are right now actually are in a hassle because they're at some point they're realizing, hey, it cannot go on like it is at the moment because we have to change something, but they're kind of unsecure on what to do and how to do it because always, even if you're saying it's leadership or it's technology, it's some kind of investment you have to do. And I think there was another arena going on with you guys, invest or save all the money. And so right now, that is exactly the challenge that we're facing. Some companies work just half time, and as you can imagine, half time they're only there to, how should I say, do business really, really minimal and not having the power actually go through a digital transformation. So again, some companies that already started are pursuing this way, maybe not even putting more pressure behind it, and some others are actually right in the struggle. And if I'm looking at Europe itself, and maybe this is also something I would like to comment in regards to what's more important, technology or leadership. What I see here is there's going to be a big spread in regards to companies that are huge and gigantic, 10,000 employees plus, and smaller ones. Because the smaller ones are, if they're in the market for, let's just say 10 or 20 or 30 years, they have their kind of working, so they have their culture, and they're really, really struggling with digital transformation. As of companies who are, as a startup, of course, you could use all of this great technology that is already out there because you don't have a culture that is 30 years old. You don't have processes that have been in place for 30 years. And that is where I'm seeing a big gap between large organizations which have the power to pursue this new technology and smaller ones who hopefully will not get, crumbled during this time, but have the power to stay alive. And I think that is also a big challenge we are seeing here with our clients.
Yeah, very interesting thought. I mean, I'm pretty sure that most of the large organizations that are going through those digital transformations, right, that would love to be able to move at the pace of a smaller organization, right, to be able to quickly switch, to quickly adopt new technology and change their line of business, right? But I don't believe that I myself actually witnessed any examples of that, right? Of course, there are some that go at a better pace. Some of them are actually revolutionizing the way that they want to do their business, right? And some of them actually, unfortunately, get stuck in this whole process, right? And they never get out of it, right? So by the time they actually achieve their goals, they have to start all over again, right? So in this case, I would say that probably this is not a technology issue. This might be just the leadership itself, right? But again, from my perspective, because I can, we see all of these customers that are now again rethinking their processes. One of the, main reasons that they say that they failed in their previous transformation process is technology, right? So technology that they were using or that they were looking to use did not fulfill their expectations. Daniel, what do you think about this kind of perspective, right? That most customers say that technology was kind of failing on them, and nobody wants to blame themselves when it gets to leadership, of course, right? But most of the customers do say that it's all about technology that has limited their growth and their change.
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the time it may be that, especially when you're just starting out a digital transformation, folks have very high expectations. A lot of the time, the executive leadership team has seen like this very rehearsed and polished demo, and it's very exciting, and they see all the things, how everything is supposed to look, in an ideal world with perfectly formatted and collected data, and all of these other hurdles that you need to go over. But I think that what happens is once you get into the real world, they realize that, it doesn't really work like that, and there's a host of other challenges, whether that's the culture or the technological limitations that you've had in place in the past. I think one of the big ones that might stand out would be that data collection area, where everyone wants analytics, and all these applications now especially are saying they can give you proactive insights, and they're very analytics driven, and they can make everyone better. But they all need data, and if your organization hasn't already been collecting that and standardizing it and organizing it in the format, then I think you're going to have very big problems. And then on top of that, I think, you know, that's a very intimidating area from a lot of workers to use, especially those that aren't, you know, math people or numbers people. And so I think that, you know, that's especially one of the areas that you really need. The leadership needs to come in and upskill those workers and develop that culture of data driven and, I guess, integration across departments. And I think that's one of the ways that they can mitigate that, because yeah, the nature of transformation and change is that it's very disruptive and very different. But I think it's all about the leadership to sort of fit their processes and make their organization align with the technology, because you obviously can't go to the software company and say, make your technology fit to us.
Well, it depends, right? There are some organizations that actually, only focus on custom development, and they, can do pretty much anything that you want, right? But again, in this case, we're saying that this takes longer to deliver. The results are very often not as good, right? Because again, business demands are changing. The way that people want to do business, they change as well. And then you're back again into that cycle of, redoing the whole thing again, or looking for a new software, right? But of course, right? And also nice attack on pre-sales and product evangelists that are painting a nice picture with the software during the demonstrations. I think we now have a third option on the voting. Like, what is the challenge? The product guys, right? But yeah, I agree a lot with the whole thought around, like you have to have a very good base of a technology to be able to achieve what you want, to have the data that you need to have in order to build the analysis, right? And on the other hand, again, I believe that those people that you mentioned, that they paint a nice picture, right? A fully polished demo. Sometimes it's not even about the functionality. Sometimes it is about the vision, about not a state of how you want to do it now, but what you should be doing, right? Or how things should be done in your case in the future, right? When you have all of this. So perhaps it's just kind of a different perspective on how to position the software, how to position the customers perspective over where they want to go, right? Eric, what do you think in regards of the post-COVID digital transformation processes? Where are they going to be stuck?
So again, I think it's going to be more focused on how they get back to business, right? Like, so if we think about, and I'm a finance guy, you know this, if we think about like the financial industry, banks, is there a need for branch locations anymore? Can we do all of this virtually now? Like, do we actually need a teller sitting in a branch location anymore? What do we do if there isn't an effect on the level of service that we're providing? Can we just do this virtually now? So are we getting rid of all of our real estate, the expensive leases that we have, making people work remotely and being able to support from that perspective? So I think that, from a digital transformation perspective, they'll be stuck with how are we going to continue, again, rather than replace these employees, but repurpose these employees to become more, revenue generating employees, rather than, people sitting in a cubicle just waiting for, service calls to come in. We'll be able to automate most of this, and it's a matter of, how do we go beyond just that service? How do we repurpose these employees and create new skill sets for them that will enable us to grow as an organization? So that is the biggest challenge. Technology is, obviously, always a part of that. But again, you have to have that vision from the top down on how we're going to adapt and how we're going to repurpose these employees. I think that's the biggest challenge I see.
Interesting. And I'm actually now looking at the voting results on our conversation, right? And I think that more than 75, it's closer to 80 right now, of our attendees believe that the leadership is actually the main challenge in these processes, right? The rest is on the technology side. And this is actually a very interesting, kind of a position that our viewers have, right? Because usually they're somewhere in the middle. There's no kind of like leaning towards one option specifically. Now I see that, most of the people do kind of thing that the leadership is going to be and is the main challenge. So maybe we can as well kind of address the whole idea of how to overcome these challenges, like because Stefan, you have incredible experience of more than 20 years with implementing the softwares. Then you work a lot with with customers, specifically like looking at the CRM processes, right, and analytics. So can you guys share some of your experience around actually overcoming these challenges? Like, what do you see that the successful companies that achieve this transformation, like, what do they do?
From my point of view, there are three things. One is take the topic seriously, make it a one priority. So again, I probably would vote for leadership here in this topic. Making sure that the things you want to achieve are supported by CEO, CIO, all those people. And they understand that, how should I say, you have to sometimes fail fast, because I'm always getting to ask the question is, you have done this 100 times. Can you just show us what is perfect for us? And then I'm always saying, of course, the method is going to be the same, but you have to find your own way. You have your own culture, you have your own strategy, you have your own product, you have something that is unique to the market. So I cannot just give you, how should I say, a schema and do it exactly like this, and then you will be 100% successful, because then I would have been supporting, 100 business just exactly like you, and that's not the case. So again, and of course, sometimes involve your company that you are trusting to guide you on that way. Please involve them more difficult or more into the topic, because then they can actually guide you through those processes. Because what I'm seeing oftenly that some strategies are hidden because they're kind of afraid that you do some oversells or some overconsult that we don't want to do. It's more of like a trust relationship that we need to build so that we can actually talk about all those things. And as I said, we are partners, we're on even ice, and we don't want to, how should I say, just sell you something because of the point of selling.
Interesting. Dan, can you share your thoughts and your experience on overcoming the leadership challenge within the transformation process?
Yeah, sure. I think one of the key areas is really taking a critical look at the organization and seeing where the gaps lie. So before you even really start, ripping any technology out or putting any in, understand what skills and characteristics and traits do I not have sort of at the top here that can drive this down, because obviously any sort of change is going to be led top down. So I think, I think one of the easy ways to break it down is you've got, as far as the leadership, you could have like these digital leaders or the born digital leaders that are, very experienced and already very capable in that area. And then you would have those that can become sort of that way. So you may think of like a traditional executive that is still open to learn and willing to do that, but they would have different skills. They would be sort of more relationship focused and better able to maybe build up support or gather an evangelist team. And then you might have some of these more technical folks that would be, I guess, more single-minded in the technology requirements. And I think really being able to meld both of those and understand that, especially if you're a more traditional company that's toward the beginning of one of these transformations, you probably don't have the digital skills in-house, at least not at the executive level, because if you did, you would probably already be further along your transformation. So I think being able to sort of critically look at where you're missing and then add those skills and fill them in at the start, rather than going back and playing catch up once you've already started to tear things apart. I think that's one of the keys.
Sure. And this is actually a very interesting thought that you basically both kind of shared, right? If you're going to fail, you better fail in the very beginning. But for me, because, the way that we position CREATIO and the way that we see CREATIO being implemented in different organizations, another very important thing, and I think this is also somewhere like in the root of the problem, is also to have that software that can actually quickly change 180 degrees and go into a different direction, right? If we see that the one that we've selected before is not actually working for the company, right? And this is the whole idea that we have in mind when we actually develop the software, is that you should have the ability to quickly change the direction that you're going to. Not necessarily if you're failing, right? But if your kind of strategy as a company changes, right? If you see that vision that you've actually established through leadership and what you've perceived as going to be the future is that not actually working, right? Or there's a new factor that is coming into play, for instance, the whole COVID thing, right? Where you have to have the ability, technological ability to actually change, right? And this is why I personally will still believe that technology is, the key to a successful transformation, right? But it can also be a challenge if you're not going to be selecting the right software for your process. You're basically doomed, no matter where you fail and when you fail, right? In the very beginning or by the very end, you're still going to fail, and there's no going to be turning back from it, right? Eric, from your more than 20 years of experience of working with different organizations, you've probably seen a couple of waves of these transformations that were starting like 15 years ago, then 10 years ago, 5 years ago. How has the IT landscape actually changed here as well, right? How does the software change with these processes?
Yeah. So we've seen all kinds of advances, and just to kind of talk about digital transformation, right? That's means different things to different people. A lot of organizations might think digital transformation is a cool way of saying we're moving to the cloud, right? But that's not necessarily what digital transformation is. So from a technology standpoint, it's really about, again, innovating new ways of doing business and creating new products that is going to differentiate yourself from your competitors. So, I mean, we've seen, digital transformation come in the form of Internet of Things. How do we have, machines talking to each other? How do we collect that data? How do we, create more remote work? We've seen the technology change, but one thing that I think it's causing a challenge with is now how do we govern all of this technology? So technology is always going to be evolving. If you think about just communications, we went from sending letters, writing letters, and sending them to being able to text message, to email, to whatever the communication option is going to be going forward. Technology is always going to evolve. Now it's a matter of how quickly are you able to adapt to technology and then use that technology, create a strategy around it, is really what's going to be important. So technology has always evolved. Digital transformation is going to mean different things at different times to different people. But again, I think that we have to manage that technology in a way that's going to differentiate ourselves. And and I think it speaks to both management as well as technology. You've got to be quick, right? Because not only does technology change, but consumer expectations change. And if you're not keeping up with it at a pace quicker than your competitors, you're destined to fail. So it's hard to keep up with technology. So it's more how are you going to govern that? How are you going to use that? And it's going to be those teams that really understand it from a business perspective, right? A business acumen. Your CIO now has to be as smart from a business standpoint as he is from a technology standpoint. You really need that alignment, and that's how you're going to adapt to that technology.
Interesting. And I've noticed a few interesting questions in the chat area as well, right? And one of them is actually around the specific skills that the leadership should have, right, in order to be able to actually initiate this transformation process for the organization, right? And I think it would be very good to actually kind of discuss and see what would be, our ideas around that, and maybe this will help somebody to actually kick off a digital transformation in their organization. So, Dan, what would you say is like the required minimum set of skills that is needed in a leader to start that process?
Sure. I mean, I think a lot of the skills are sort of those that would characterize a leader anyway. For example, like emotional intelligence and sort of that ability to relate to a group of folks and really sort of sell your idea. So show them and convince them why what you're trying to push onto them is going to make their life easier and better. And I think another one that is very important is sort of that ability to learn new skills, but to dive very deeply into things on a self-motivated level. So if you're like a new CIO, and if we take the simple example of moving all your infrastructure onto the cloud, that's a lot of new material that you're going to probably have to learn if you're really familiar with managing that on-premise infrastructure. So you need to be sort of willing and able to really dive in and go as deep as you need to be, because you are the one that's responsible for that entire system. So I think those are probably two good places to start.
Interesting. Or you can also hire an analyst firm or a partner consultant that can help you do that a lot quicker, right? And probably
If you've got the money, yeah.
on a better skill and a better level as well. Stefan, what do you think about the skills that you have? Share, tell us what you think.
Actually, I totally agree with Daniel. I think what we have seen in the past in regards to IT jobs is that they are getting more and more specialized. Just remember 10 years ago, you could probably had 1 or 2 or 3 guys maybe in IT who were taking care of the whole IT infrastructure. Right now, you need one for databases, one for Exchange server, and so on, maybe one for cloud, et cetera, et cetera. You could probably, take on that list for hours and hours. Because things in technology, again, there's a challenge, is getting more and more complex and more into details. So this general overview is even more and more difficult to get. And I think that is one of the challenges in regards to finding this right person, who has enough understanding in regards to all these new technologies, blockchain, cloud, AI, ML, just to name some phrases here. But deep enough to really talk or think with business about how we can adopt and use those technologies for our business. And I think that is one of the greatest challenge, if not the greatest challenge.
Yeah, interesting. Well, for me personally, based on my experience working within these or being involved in these transformation projects, right? I think that another quality or skill that you should develop is actually be able to think without specific limit. Right, so thinking not just outside the box, but thinking about not what is going to limit you in achieving your goals and your results, but actually seeing that picture, right, and then understanding the strategy where you want to be actually then making those steps, right? Because you can take one step at a time, and if you don't see yourself limiting in making that step, right, it's actually going to help you. I mean, sometimes you can burn yourself on thinking that way, right, when you're not paying attention to detail and you're just slamming through the door. But most of the time, this proves to have very good results in general, right?
I would take that even a step further, Alex.
Okay.
I mean, so in terms of, it's one thing to have, the ideas and the concepts, but it's also, what I think is one of the biggest challenges is communication, right? These are 2 different languages that we're talking. Business and IT are 2 completely different languages. And if you're trying to align those together, you need to have effective leadership that's going to be able to communicate a message in simple terms, right? So you need to pass that message down from the business in simple terms, and vice versa from the IT side. It can't be technical driven. You have to be able to speak the language and simplify the communication strategy. So I think that, beyond just coming up with the concepts and the ideas, it's also how are we going to communicate these concepts and ideas so that the entire organization is aligned. Because again, they're 2 different languages, and it's really going to be those leaders that can effectively communicate those strategies across the entire organization that are really going to be successful. So I think that that's one challenge or one skill set that leaders are going to need to have on both sides of the house, business and technology.
Yeah, interesting. There was actually a good question in the chat area asking about the fancy job roles and fancy job titles that are now we see more and more, like tech leader, innovation leader, transformation leader. Do you guys think that this is something that organizations should do, introduce those specific job titles, or this is something that is, just a fancy couple of words on your business card?
Well, as a sales enablement leader, I think that it speaks to again the new roles that we're all acquiring, right? It's no longer are you sales strategist. Now you're enabling the sales strategy to go across multiple aspects of the business, and I think that the roles really are trying to break those stereotypes, I guess, if you will, right? Like when you hear CIO, they're responsible for keeping the infrastructure up and the servers up and running and our network. But no, it goes beyond that now. So I think it's good in the sense that you're breaking those stereotypes a bit, because the roles are changing, they are evolving. So sometimes you want to break down that preconception that this is what that person does. So maybe a renaming, is appropriate.
Interesting. And I remember we had this conversation, I think it was last time on Last Arena, right? When we were talking about what should a good CIO or CTO be nowadays. They should be tech leaders, or they should be just, thinking about innovate. They should be inventors, innovators in their businesses, right? And I believe that the audience then split as well, somewhere like 50-50 about that. So Stefan, what do you think about the fancy job titles? Is it something that organizations should do?
I don't care about job titles, actually. Just give me a role description, tell me what you're doing, and I tell you if that is sensible or not. I know that maybe in larger organizations, a good job title, will increase your salary or something. I don't know. In the organizations I like to work with, it's more down to basic. Give me a job description. What do you feel responsible for? What do you feel accountable for? Those are more the questions I would like to ask. And then, you can call yourself God. I don't care.
Interesting. Okay, well, the interesting thing here is that as I'm looking at the score and the voting results, I see that the audience is almost kind of again breaking even on the audience. Yeah, we're at some point it was around like 59, 48. Now it's around 60, 40 on the other side. And I see that it's actually changing all the time, right? So people are either changing their mind, or we have new viewers that are actually voting. And in the chat area, there is a lot of talk about the leadership itself, right? That it's all about the person, it's all about the culture. And what made me think about is, does it really just depend on the personality, right? Should that person who's initiating this digital transformation, should it be just a good salesperson that can sell the idea internally in the organization, right? To be the leader that's going to bring the whole company, bring the whole organization to the future. How do you think, where is it really all about the person itself, or is it still going to be somewhere in the general strategy understanding of where it should go as an organization?
I think it's going to be a combination of both, right? You have to have the ability to understand direction. You have to understand goals. But you also have to communicate those goals and the strategy in a way that's going to get everybody engaged in that solution. If you're not a dynamic person that's going to be able to sell it, if you will, internally, you're not going to have that buy-in, and you're not going to create that enthusiasm and get everybody marching in the same direction if you do not have the ability to do that. So I think that leaders need to be dynamic these days. They need to have all kinds of different acumens. They need to be public speakers.
So what you're saying is that extroverts are basically driving the digital transformation processes now.
I think you have to have a little extrovert in you. Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Daniel, what do you think about the role of the personality in the of that leader specifically, or a couple leaders that drive the digital transformation processes? How crucial that is going to be, or is it in fact crucial?
Yeah, definitely. I think the character of the leadership could really make or break the success of one of these initiatives. I think because it really requires so much of that relating to the people, because you're asking these people to change the way that they're working. And like I said, people have their habits and the ways that they feel comfortable. So I think, if you have an abrasive personality, or if you are not able to relate to them on that personal level, because I think intellectually, most people could agree that, across as a blanket, that a digital transformation is a good idea. But I think that agreeing that it's a good idea and then saying that I want to change the way I work and I want to, adopt this technology and become different, I think there's probably a gap there that you really need to be able to bridge that gap as a leader, or else you're going to sort of wither on the vine within the very earliest stages of that transformation.
Interesting. Stefan, tell us what you think.
Um, yeah, well, I mean, all you're describing is actually Superman in my ears. I'm still looking for that guy. I have met a few. I'm actually talking to a few right now, but this is, of course, well, it's difficult. It's difficult, and I mean, the strongest part could be know your weaknesses and get help for your weaknesses. If you know you're not strong in communication, get somebody to help you to communicate those things. If you're not strong on technology, get somebody to help you to work on that technology part. So I guess you don't have to combine all those things in one person. If you know your weaknesses, get help for that.
Interesting. Okay, perfect. Well, I think that we're going to be closing up this arena in a couple of minutes. So usually, what we do is by the end of the session, we do like, closing remarks, supporting your idea. Maybe if you've changed your position during this conversation, right? So again, probably 45 seconds, 1 minute, as long as you want. Closing supporting remarks towards your position. And again, Stefan, tell us, have you changed your mind? Do you still believe that technology is the main challenge, or you've changed camps and now you also support the idea of the leadership being the challenge in the digital transformation process?
Let me just put it that way. I think both positions have their room and both positions are valid. Actually, in regards to technology, and I think that is something that scares me of the most at the moment, is we're thinking about into regards of ML, so machine learning and artificial intelligence, which is becoming more and more popular. And if you're looking for a partner, that actually, if those machines are making decisions and can explain why they're making these decisions, that is actually scaring me as hell. I already know some businesses that are depending on MI and AI, and sometimes, those guys can't even explain to customers why this machine is making this decision, but their business model is depending on it, and that scares me. That's the reason why I think technology is the greatest challenge.
Okay, interesting. Daniel, your closing remarks.
Sure. I think that the ML AI is a particularly good example to support technology. I mean, I think really the answer lies somewhere in the middle. I mean, the technology needs to be able to deliver, all of the goals and meet the goals of the digital transformation. But I think without the people in place to really sell the move and I guess create the culture that's going to make those people able to maximize the value of that technology, then it's not going to work either way. So I think, yeah, especially with some of these new cutting edge technologies like the machine learning and the AI, I think the technology really is in that case probably the most important. But I think, on a large scale, if you're just thinking the digital transformations that we see nowadays, so maybe some of the less sophisticated, I think still the leadership is really the key driver.
Okay, interesting. Eric?
Yeah, so I'm with the rest of the team. I think one is dependent on the other, but you can have the coolest, latest technology in the world, but without a plan and without a vision, it's not going to do you any good. We talked about this the other day, guys. Like, I look at it from a sales perspective. People don't want to buy a 1/4 inch drill; they want to make a 1/4 inch hole, right? So if we don't have that goal in mind and that end result, the best tools in the world are just that. They're tools. They're not driving to a result. So I still think that leadership is key and the biggest challenge that we see in digital transformation.
Okay, interesting. Well, I'm gonna stick with my initial thought that it is all about the technology, right? And for me personally, the reason why it is the technology that is the challenge is because leadership, having and being able to lead the organization forward is really the strategy, right? This is where you want to go. This is the strategy. You're just going to lead this train of transformation, right? But technology is going to be the tactical steps that are going to be helping you achieve this, right? If you're not going to have the right technology, regardless of the leadership, you're not going to achieve those. You're not going to achieve those results and those goals. Right. And yeah, I'm just going to stick with myself. And at this point, we're just going to close down the voting on our arena. I'm just looking at the final scores. 63% of the audience are pro leadership, 37 are, pro technology of being the main challenges in the digital transformation processes. And that being said, I would like to thank you all for having the time for this conversation. It was very insightful, very helpful, actually, I believe, not just for me, and Eric, but for our audience as well. To all of our viewers, thank you again for joining. Thank you for being with us. Thank you for sharing your ideas and your thoughts. I would like to quickly announce that we're going to host our next CREATIO Arena on 2nd of July at the same time as today. Our topic next time is going to be the future of IC, if the citizen developers are going to take over the traditional and pro developers' place, which is a very interesting conversation that we're going to have because I am pro citizen development for sure, right? So, gentlemen, thank you again. Thank you for joining, and I hope to talk to you soon as part of the arena or just in person. Thank you all.
Thanks, guys.
Take care.
Thanks, everyone.